Welcome to the Two Girls with Grief book club. We might laugh or we might cry, but we always read.
This is the book club where we might make ourselves cry, but sometimes read books that are fun too, like today's book, which we're finishing up, which is Emily Henry's The Beach Read. What are your thoughts on the ending?
We get to the spiciest part of the book. We're getting to the most drama. It picks up pace. There's a lot
It's a lot
bunched
going on.
in at these last couple chapters. She really drags it out to the end.
She really does. Yeah, it was an emotional roller coaster a little bit. Again, I feel like I really like Gus reading the book, but I'm like, in real life, I don't know that I would. The
Fair.
hot and cold,
Yeah.
the
I'd be
the
annoyed.
like I love you, but like I'm gonna not talk to you for a few days, like the whiplash. Like I don't know that I would be okay with that. I feel like I would actually hate him.
Right. Yeah, in theory, you like him as like just a character in
Yeah,
literature, but in real
yeah.
life, probably not. Red flags
Red
galore.
flags. Definitely red flags. So we're doing chapters 21 through 28, which are the rest of the book. We're finishing it out. And so chapter 21 opens up where they're basically, this is where they're hooking up. We kind of mix up or like combine the chapters a little bit. But 21 is when it actually happens. They end up going to Gus's place because that's where he has the protection to keep going. And they finally do it. Gus professes all his feelings. He said that he liked her before she moved in, before he saw her. He's like, even before that goddamn frat parties. That's basically the one time they were like all hot and heavy, dancing it up at the party. And he admits like he liked her since then. So then January's kind of freaking out. Like, I found out the person that I liked in college and had a huge crush on actually liked me. I don't know. Cute thought.
And it's not in this chapter. Is it a later chapter when he starts talking about, well, you hated me? And she's like, I didn't hate you. And he's like, yeah, you did. And it seemed like it was just like missed communication from the get-go.
I don't know if it's in this chapter or not, but was it saying that like I thought she said that he hated her.
Yeah, he was like, I was trying
Because,
to show
because
you
he's
how much I liked you and you hated me and you didn't talk to me. And then she was
because
like, no, I did. And then he's like, no, you didn't. And they're like, not
yeah,
not
because
connecting.
he would like critique her papers and he was like, oh, I was an asshole, but he like, revolved his whole day around seeing her and having communication with her, and she just kind of acted like nonchalant, didn't care. But I think that comes out like in a fight later. But I
Mhm.
did all those like cute moments. He's like slowly unraveling like, how much he liked her and just how much she would do. And I think a lot of their relationship is just like a lot of miscommunication,
Yeah,
which is, you know,
that's life.
everybody. That's life. That's everyone. But of course, in Gus fashion, though, they do hook up, and then he gets a phone call, and then he asks her to leave, basically, and that he's gonna come meet her at his place. So another instance where I'm like, if this was me, I would hate him.
Yeah, this phone call is playing rent-free in her head. She is
Yeah,
assuming the worst. She has anxiety about what this phone call meant and who it's from, and we don't know anything as the reader, but she puts in these assumptions and implications, and we'll see this play out in the next few chapters.
yeah, and it's crazy how he keeps doing that to her, and how I still loved him when I read the book. But they do end up going to the 4th of July barbecue. I think we already mentioned it, but this is where they actually go. And Gus is just acting weird. He won't tell her what's wrong. He won't talk to her. At one point, I think it goes into chapter 22 where basically she's looking for him and he's like laying down in a room, like not, and it's like during a barbecue, so he's just like not hanging out with her, and she's just like freaking out about that because she's like, what the hell? Like, what are you doing? Like, we just hooked up and now you just don't want to spend time with me. And I hated him in this moment.
Yeah, she's kind of like showing you there's the fun Gus, the one that's comfortable around his family, the one that's really warm, and then there's this like closed off side of him. And she's like, I just need to know what's going on because like the worst thoughts are running through my head right now.
Yeah. And then they're supposed to have their non-date, which is basically Gus is going to the fire. Basically, the cult, I think everyone died in a big fire. I don't remember if it was intentional, if it was like a suicide cult or just like a cult. I don't remember
Mhm.
if it was an accident. But he's basically like, come if you want. He just was very weird about it. And I hate that if someone's like, come if you want, or very nonchalant, like, I'm not gonna come if a guy's just like, maybe you should come. I'd be so annoyed with that. And I hated that Gus did that to her.
Yeah, and then it kinda turns into a big old thing because it was originally
Yeah.
just, like, going out there, but then it starts raining, and then they gotta, like, set up a fire, and then, like, they've gotta protect their laptops, and it's kinda like this big thing now,
Yeah.
and meanwhile, she's like, "He doesn't even want me to be here, like, what am I doing here
Yeah.
out in the middle of the wilderness, and it's raining, and I'm sitting here in a tent by myself?"
I would definitely be mad. guy took that guy took me to the middle of the wilderness and was ignoring me and it was raining. Yeah. I would not be happy. I think they were like wet in there. But finally she's like, Gus, tell me what's wrong. And he tells her that the phone call was from his divorce lawyer and his ex wife, Naomi, wants to rethink the divorce. And apparently she had already broken up with the guy that she cheated on with him. And he was freaking out about that. And then, of course, January's freaking out. And this is when, actually, I think it comes out that he would revolve his college life around her by like coming in late to class to sit behind her and dropping books and stuff and asking for pencils. And his best friend was like, I don't think it's a good idea you date January because you know how like crazy you were or like stupid you were when it comes to her. And that's when he reveals that to January. And she's like, What are you talking about? And I think they have really good banter in this scenario. A little bit more fighting than banter,
Yeah, it was a little more
probably.
serious than fun.
Yeah. But it was interesting to see like I don't know how many people can you could have an impact on someone and you don't know it or vice versa and they both really liked each other and it just never came out until that day that she looked at him at the frat party and finally looked at him and he was freaking out. It was like I can't be your perfect like Fabio and thinks that like Fabio would be the type of like guy that she would date and like that's not him and he wants January in every way. He said, I want to take you on dates. I want to play the fucking beach ball in the pool. He's like, but I'm a wreck and I don't know how to act around you, which I felt like was real and honest. But
Yeah.
also, like, why are you putting her through the ringer if you liked her so much and so much self doubt? Like, I feel like that is really unhealthy in a relationship, but maybe that's just like you're like doubting yourself in the relationship.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure because these chapters, like, they blur together. It's, like, over one event, but then
Mm-hmm.
it's, like, 2 chapters, so I think that's why, like, we keep,
Yeah.
like, skipping
It
ahead, so
gets
I don't.
confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's, like, the end of this chapter or the beginning of the next one when she's like, "Then explain to me then why you didn't even want me to come on this, like, hiking trip with you." And he says, "Well, I didn't wanna bring you to something sad, like, this is a place where a lot of
Yeah.
people died, and I just didn't think you wanted to, like, deal with that right now." And she, like I like I like the way she worded it, although I can't remember how she worded it, but she's like, "That should have been my choice. You shouldn't have made the choice for me. You asked me to come, but you don't get to assume whether this is gonna be good or bad for me." Like, she's a consenting adult, so, like, if she wants to go hiking in a cult death scene, like,
Yeah.
that's her prerogative. But I think, like, that's so relatable too when people are trying to support grievers, and I know you and I had talked about this a lot on previous episodes, but, like, friends not including their grieving friends because they think that they're not ready to, like, hang out or go do something.
Yeah.
Um, to make the choice for the person and not communicate with them in advance. Like, you're reducing that control for the person. You're reducing
Yeah.
that choice for the person when they can, like, give them the opportunity to make that choice. Because they might surprise you and they might say, yeah, like, I am ready to, like, go out and do stuff and, like,
Yeah.
join normal society. And I like that that was just, like, an example, but that could be applied in a grief sense. Because, like, I know how I feel whenever, like, a decision was made for me, but I didn't even get a choice on what I wanted.
Yeah. Also, I feel like that just leads to the whole miscommunication and
Right,
hurt
yeah.
feelings. And you're sorting it out for yourself, but like when your friends make executive decisions for you and how you're
Mhm.
feeling, that's a really hard thing. Well, we're on to chapter 23. And one thing that he does say to that, which I did really like the line, was he said, when you love someone, you want this world to look different for them, to give all the ugly stuff meaning and to amplify the good. And I thought that was sweet. It's kind of those things where you wish when you've lost people and experienced so much pain and so much sadness and so much disappointment with just loss, it's like you wish you could see the world differently,
Yeah.
because you do see the world differently, but in a more delicate way. And it's like I wish I could see the world the way that I did before all of this happened. And so I related to that line, and he said like he doesn't want January to see the world like he does. And it's like I don't I don't know how I want people to like interpret how I see the world. I want to have a positive look
Yeah.
on the world, but like that is not as easy.
Yeah. A lot easier said than done. And I definitely think when you're in the thick of grief, obviously you're going to be really pessimistic. Like you've just lost
Yeah.
a huge person in your life and you're trying to navigate like how to move forward. I was like the biggest pessimist, I think, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. Like
Yeah.
and I think like she keeps referring to Gus as like he's a realist. But I think there is something to be said. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of kind of blind hope, I think, to see the world in a little bit more of a beautiful way than the reality you're living in. And I know you
Yeah.
and I have talked about like that's a choice you have to make, and it is hard. I'm not saying that's easy. Like
Yeah.
we just said, it's a lot easier said than done. Um, I have my days where it's like it's easier to feel that way. I have days where it's just like hard, and I'm like, it is really difficult for me to see like the beauty and the goodness in the world when so much stuff is happening, and on top of that, like you're grieving, and so I love the dialogue that they have between the two about both their perspectives on the world, and him assuming that she's like the sugar plum princess fairy seeing the world so beautiful and bright, when in reality we know her inner narrative. She's struggling with this. She's struggling with her grief.
Yeah.
She's struggling with the position and the relationship she had with her dad. And her worldview isn't as glowingly optimistic as he assumes it is. And I like that she kind of, even though she can probably turn back around and say, oh, he's like the biggest pessimist, she has clarified herself and said, like, he's just a realist. He just sees things in a clear, objective sense, not good, not bad. It just is. But he thinks he's more pessimistic than he actually is.
Yeah, she actually has a line and she says sometimes people are brighter and braver than they know, and she's referring to Gus,
Oh,
which
beautiful.
I think is a beautiful line. And it's one of the things where I think Gus sees himself in such a sad way and like he's
Yeah.
broken and wrecked, and she sees that beauty in him. And I think that's kind of with fellow grievers, is you see the beauty in them and like I hate the word strength, but like resilience is probably, I don't know the word.
Yeah. Or
uh
maybe persistence.
yeah, like
Pull
you
up a
see that.
thesaurus.
Yeah, you see that let's pull it up. Do you see it in other people, right? You notice it and you can identify it. And I think that's harder for people on the outside to always really see, because they don't really know what it really takes
Yeah.
to be functioning in the real world. So I always think it's sweet. Like I said, what I like about them in this book is like it's like to be loved is to be seen, and I feel like they really see each other, and I
Yeah.
think that's really sweet. And I feel like the last lines ish in this chapter is she mentions how like kind of all of this she's learning, like she can miss her dad and hate him at the same time.
I
And
love
like
that she brought that up.
yeah, and I think that's just so true about someone that passes away. Just because they're gone doesn't mean that whatever complicated relationship you had or complicated things happen doesn't mean that it just goes away. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you just let it go. Like, sure, it'd be nice if like that would just happen, but that's just not real life. Whatever was happening there still exists. And I think she's starting to realize everything's not so black and white and things are a little bit more confusing. Just it's life is just a little bit more blurry than it is very clear with things.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when when, you're talking to other grievers, and I don't wanna say that, like, losing your dad is, like, a normal thing among grievers, but
Yeah.
it becomes a more common thing. Like, losing your
Yeah.
parents becomes a higher probability as people get older because that's just life. But, even say that someone has a perfect, loving relationship with their father, in this case, just using my own example, it's still gonna be a painful grieving experience. And then you look at someone who might have lost their father and it's a very complicated relationship, and so it was really painful and hurtful. That is such a completely different grief experience than someone with a, you know, loving, heartfelt, secure relationship with their father. And I think, like, I think that's why you and I also talk so much about, like, there's no one path for this because
Yeah.
it's so individualistic per the person. And I did have a wonderful relationship with my dad. I was his caregiver at the end of his life, and yet, I have to acknowledge that, like, my grieving experience is not gonna be the same for someone who has, like, a very, like, hypothetically, a toxic relationship with the person they're grieving. And not saying that this is the case in Beach Read, but it's the case in life. Like, nobody has a 100% perfect relationship with anybody, and so the
Yeah.
grieving process is always gonna be a little mixed and muddled. And I think, like, just reserving that margin or that room to recognize, especially when someone passes and you're grieving that person, all those little things bubble up, and you're dealing with either, like, the anger that you have towards the person who's passed, or you're dealing with the anger of yourself and, like, your position in this whole thing.
That's a point of
Um,
life.
like, grief is so much like, I think we'd like to think that there's a magic bullet to solve grief. There's not ever gonna be. But on top of that, these are complicated relationships that people face because we're all dealing
Yeah.
with very different relationships with the very different people in our lives.
Yeah. It is. Life is complicated. Basically, is
And
what the
grief is
story.
complicated.
Grief is very complicated. So chapter 24 opens up where she's cleaning around with Gus. I feel like they're kind of going back into that like coupley, which I feel like they keep going like in and out of like being coupley and
Yeah,
not,
ups and downs.
which is kind of annoying to me because it's like if I'm getting cozy with someone and then it changes like excuse me, no, but
Like enemies to lovers to enemies to lovers to
yeah,
enemies to lovers.
it's too much. And then that's where she does find a safe, but she doesn't know how to open it. But then that becomes back to be like a pivotal thing. But and this chapter's shorter, but there was a line in this chapter that really stood out to me, and she said, "You lost beautiful things, years of your mother's good health, your shot at your dream career, your father way too soon, but you found them too. A coffee shop with the world's worst espresso, a bar with line dancing, and a messy, beautiful neighbor like Gus Everett." And I feel like that's just such a, obviously not that exact thing, but I feel like that is kind of just a good explanation of where you want to be
Yeah.
or head to in your grief process. It's like all these shitty things happen that you don't have control over, but then you want to be able to also accept and love the good
Yeah.
and welcome that into your life. And that's obviously harder to do. And it's not an easy place to get to, but I like that's where her progression is going. Like there are beautiful things that can happen
Yeah.
that bring you joy despite the other things.
I was thinking about the book on the way to work and thinking that when bad things happen, especially, you losing people, I think a lot of people would say that's like one of the things that can happen to you that could really just like disrupt your life. And what would be a way to like help soothe that? And I thought of these things in the way that she was talking about, like the good and the bad kind of balance each other. And I remember at the time when it was told to me, I kind of just rolled my eyes and goughed. But now that I'm kind of further out from the loss and I'm not just so like overwhelmed with profound, like that immediate like crying emotion, that like being present is so critical to one, facing your grief, but then also appreciating those beautiful moments. Because I was in those phases where I was so consumed by grief, I couldn't appreciate or have gratitude for the things
Yeah.
in my life. I couldn't find joy because I just let that grief consume me. In the same way that I would experience something beautiful and I would feel a ping of grief and I would think, oh, I got to put that away. I can't experience this right now. And I think something happened in my mindset where if you're present in the moment, whatever that may be, whether it is a difficult time or a beautiful time, and you feel that opposite emotion begin to bubble in you, to just acknowledge that and feel that. I'll tell you, like, looking at the like your videos of San Francisco, I'm like, "Oh my god, how like lovely." And I think of all the beautiful things that I have seen. A couple years ago, me and McKenna went to Yosemite, and I remember looking out and just thinking, I don't know why I felt this way. This is so beautiful, and yet I wish my dad could see this. And it was one of the first times I began to practice. You feel sad in this moment. You're looking at something really beautiful, and yet you feel this tinge of sadness. And being in the moment and just recognizing that you can feel overwhelmed beauty and the same time feeling sad. And you don't have to tell yourself, oh, you need to be feeling a different way. And just letting that sit and be like, okay, that's how I feel right now. I think that's one of like a little step to take in that you'll never get rid of the grief, but you can acknowledge it, give it its space, and however it may show up. For some reason, looking at beautiful landscapes, I feel a little more griefy. Um, but I think that's in a lot of things. Like you'll have these beautiful events in life and you're gonna think, damn, I wish the people I lost were here. And to be like, that sucks. It hurts. It hurts a lot. It's painful. And to still give it that space and think, I can still feel this happiness and this sadness simultaneously. And it's weird. It's a weird feeling if you've never had to confront that. Because I would say, like, before my dad passing, I could feel 100% happiness or 100% sadness. They didn't mix. But now I feel so much. It's a very different type of emotion. It's a swirl. Yes, it's a swirl. It's such a mix and something. It's like I unlocked a whole amount of new of emotions in my video game of life where it's like, oh, you unlocked a new level. And I'm like, great. But I thought about
Yeah.
that, especially in these like last few chapters as she,
It got definitely
developed
more
further.
reflective.
Yeah, it got way more
For sure.
reflective. And I appreciate that. I like that as the book kind of comes closer to an end, we're becoming more reflective of like her family experience as well as her
Yeah.
relationship with Gus.
And finding a little more peace. I, for some, I don't think I ever was in a phase. I know a lot of people feel guilty for being happy or feeling any happiness after grief. I never was like that. And I feel like everyone's different.
Mhm.
I feel like I was always looking for happiness. So I feel like that was always a part where I was like trying to
Yeah.
find things that made me happy and look forward to. I don't think I necessarily like understood it completely, but I definitely was not someone that was like, "Oh, I'm happy. I shouldn't be."
Yeah.
But because I knew like there's some shitty shit happening. Like I need to find things that make me happy. I
Yeah.
don't think I looked at it so holistically as I do now, but it definitely was something that I always seek. Like I need to find happiness. I need to find peace. I do though think like very much the happiness is very much intertwined with like
Mhm.
sadness. And so many times you're like, I wish they're here or I wish I could call them. Just something so small where it makes it just a little bit less happy. But yeah, I definitely for whatever reason I never was that person. I was like, oh, I shouldn't be happy at all. But I think everyone's different with how they handle things.
Yeah, I think that's such a healthy approach. And it takes, you got it. I think like I was one of those people who felt guilty for feeling happy. And in my delusion and my distortion of my brain explanation of logic during grief, it was like, I have to be sad to honor my dad. And now, a couple years out, I can say, like, my dad would never want me to honor him
Yeah.
with morose sadness. He was
I
not
think
that type of
it's
guy.
yeah, it's so common though. I see it so
Yeah.
often that people say that. So it is a
Yeah.
very common groovy thing that
And
people feel
yeah,
like they can't be happy after.
society puts this weird pressure on you. It's
Yeah.
like you need to get over it in 2 weeks or you need to be grieving about this,
Yeah.
like in like detrimental can't move on depression. And it's like it's weird that there's a societal implication on people and like what does grieving look like and what do other people expect you on how to grieve? And it's like,
Yeah.
stop putting a mold out there for people to fill, because then they can't actually grieve appropriately in how they need to.
I just saw a comment on TikTok actually where someone was posting about grief, and the person commented and was like, if you're still feeling sad after 2 years, you need help. Like you should be over it in tears. And
Whoa.
I was just like, first of all, shut up.
Yeah.
Second of all, like, if that's how you approach it, go for it. If
Mm,
that is how you feel, then do it your way, you know? But I think it's so weird to feel like you need to comment that on someone else's grief. I saw comments that were like, "Oh, I'm sorry you never loved someone so much that you could never get over their loss."
mhm.
And I feel like that's so true. And it's like, how are you just over something in 2 years? You don't
Yeah.
just get over it. That means that you just like suppress it. And
Yeah.
like that's totally different than actually dealing with it and being over with it. I hope they don't ever comment that on someone that is like really fresh in their grief or really in a bad
Yeah.
place, because that's really gonna fuck them up. Like, don't do that. Like,
Right. Yeah.
don't do that to somebody. So if that
And
is you,
to
shut
use the
up.
yeah, if you're listening, don't.
Shut up.
And I think it's weird, like, to use therapy as this time measurement indicator, because some
Yeah.
people want to jump into therapy immediately. Like, they know that's what is going to help them process it. They need a guide to kind of get through the confusion and the like, you just feel very lost when you lose somebody.
Yeah.
And, like, it does help to kind of have somebody next to you and be like, well, why don't we try these steps to process some of this? But also, you might not be ready, like, you might not be ready. There's multiple reasons why people don't go to therapy. One, cost is very prohibitive. Like, there's reason
Yeah.
therapy is very expensive. It's why not everybody is in it. Another thing, people aren't ready to address some of those major pain points. And, whether that's a month after someone's loss or, I don't know, 10 years after someone's loss, like, it's not up to anybody else to decide when they should go to therapy and talk about that. I think it takes the individual some deep reflection to realize, is going to therapy going to be beneficial for me in processing my grief? Are there things that I can try on my own? I think having it, and another thing, if you're going to go try therapy, it takes a while to find a right therapist. Like, you don't find the,
Yeah.
the right one on the first try. Um, it,
I think a lot of people would give up where it's,
yeah,
it's a hard
it's,
thing for
it's a
sure.
time investment. It's a money investment. So I do not scoff at people also for not going to therapy either. There's a ton of reasons why people don't want to or can't to, and that's fine. I knew at 3 months myself I wanted to go to therapy, and I went through and they were like, oh, you are kind of on the severe side of depression. We need to try like a different approach if that's what you would like to do. And I knew for myself that I wanted to not be, well, partly because, like, after COVID, everyone's going back to work, so that was another thing that
Yeah.
was happening at the time. But I was like, "I need to get myself out of this, like, black hole," because that's where I felt like I was. I was just in this black hole, and I couldn't see the light or the beauty in life, and I was just losing faith, and I was very glad because at least it put me one step forward. And like you and I talk about,
Yeah.
even the smallest steps is progress.
Yeah. Whatever you can do.
Yeah.
We're proud of you, whatever step you
We're
take.
proud of you.
So back to chapter 24. So this book, so the chapter ends with them going to this book event where they're like at Pete's bookstore where they're gonna both do interview questions with their books. And then Gus all of a sudden turns white. He looks like shocked and like freaked out. And January's like, what's going on? And then she just immediately knows like the person that's like staring at him, like it's Naomi, his ex-wife, or not even fully ex-wife. And Gus is just kind of weird. And then he's like, I should go see what she wants to, why she's here. And then January cries, and then she walks home from the bookstore, and Sonia's at her steps of her
Oh my
house,
god.
which is
I
like, I don't think I'd want that. Like, I just like, is my boyfriend going back to his ex-wife, and then my dad's mistress is on my doorstep? Like, that would no.
I that's when I texted you and I was like, "Oh my god." Like, the plot twists that were happening, I was like, "It is about to get wild here."
It's a wild ride. Yeah. And which is crazy. I mean, she basically broke down like chapter 25 opens like she's breaking down like the whole thing and I read the book to get the ins and outs of it. But basically, like her dad was Sonia's first love and he
They met, like,
basically
as teenagers or
yeah,
school kids.
yeah. And like he came back for work and then they reconnected and I think it was like a broken time. I don't know if it was like when maybe he was separated from his wife or when she first got cancer and they basically went to each other, which I feel like it's a common reason, but also like
It was during their separation.
that's why when it started. It happened like twice, but I think the second time might have
Mhm.
been when she had cancer, but he just was like broken, and
Yeah.
Sonia knew that like it wasn't actually about her. He just was like freaking out,
Mhm.
but that she was like he's fixing up the house, and she just knew it wasn't for her. It was for his family,
Yeah.
and so she kind of was knew it was over, and she just like had to go try to like January to understand her dad's side, and
Mhm.
it came to the realization that's why her dad gave Sonia the letters or the letter because Sonia would try to explain the dad's story and actually tell her about the beach house.
Mhm.
And she knew that her mom would not never tell her because she's only telling her so much and wasn't even a place to talk about her dad
Yeah.
in her grief journey. So then she's like, oh, she never would have told me. And like she kind of understands that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's in this dialogue that she's having with her dad's mistress when she realizes she's in the same place as Sonia. And this whole time, Sonia has been the enemy, she's been the
Yeah.
antagonist, like, we hate Sonia, and then she has this realization, she's like, "I'm the Sonia right now to Gus because he's not
Yeah.
even divorced." Like, he's talking to his wife, their divorce has not even gone through, and she kinda has this 180 where she's like, nothing does look like what it seems. And she's like, oh, there must be so much more context to not only her father's relationship, but then the one that Gus, he's in love with January, but then, he's talking to his wife, because they're not
Yeah.
divorced. And so I think like that's also a part of like this emotional breakdown that she has is she's like, partly, there's a lot of things she just didn't know because Gus, as we learned throughout the book, is not a great communicator. But then
Not
she
at all.
realizes, not at all, like is 0 out of 10 stars.
Yeah.
But she's like, oh, I'm in the same position as her. Like, and I think that's kind of a little bit of a growth moment for her, a little bit of like this forgiveness extended to her where she's like, um, is it all right and well? No. But that things were much more confusing than she originally thought.
Yeah. And this is where she finds out that her dad basically wrote her all these letters. And so it's like, you're the only
Ugh.
one that still has pieces of him. And so
Yeah.
she freaks out. She finally reads like the first letter.
Yeah, because she didn't even read the first
Yeah. She
letter.
couldn't bring herself. And so she finally reads it. And he's like, the code is like the best day of my life, which was her birthday, which is like really sweet.
I love that we
And
go on a scavenger hunt after this.
yeah.
It's like kind of fun.
And I think she goes to like his boat, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And
and
the
it's
boat is
named
named
January.
January.
Yeah, so like the first letter, and that's where she like did she find the letters there, or I don't remember that
No, the
part.
letters were in the safe. They were all in the safe. And then, like, I
Yeah.
think the key to the boat was also in the safe.
Oh, okay, yeah,
And then I think it either I don't know, one of the letters was like, you can go down to the marina. And that's when she finds the boat. And I'm like,
yeah, in
man,
the same January.
if I was learning this stuff about my dad, I would be freaking out. Like, this is like
Yeah,
so fun. Obviously, very emotional. She's learning all these new things about her dad that she didn't know. But man, to find out like letters that he wrote on her birthday, ugh,
yeah,
I would weep. I would weep. I would.
yeah.
I want that so badly for myself.
I know. Like my dad left me a beach house. But actually, one line that Sonia did say to her before she went to go look for the letters that I really liked was he said, "We can never fully know the people we love. When we lose them, they'll always be more than we could have seen." But that's what I'm trying to tell you. This house, this town, this view, it was all part of him. He wanted to share with you, and I think that was another thing of just like, people aren't perfect.
Yeah.
Everything is, it's not black and white, and I think we want people to be a certain way and see them exactly a certain way, and that's just not how things are. And so I feel like the letter, and in the first letter, he basically, a line that I liked was he said, "I want you to know that bigger than my mistakes, bigger than anything good or bad I've done, and most completely unwavering has been my love for you. And I'm afraid what the truth will do to you. I'm afraid you won't be able to love me as I am." And I feel like that's
Oh,
such an honest take
yeah.
on being an imperfect person, and knowing that his daughter is this bubbly person that believes in fairy tales and happy endings, and her finding out this like deep dark truth that everything I thought about my life is just wrong. Like he's afraid that he'll break her with what she's revealed. But and it's letters every year on her birthday, which I thought
Mhm.
was really sweet. I think up to her 28th birthday. And but what I really got out of the letters, like read the book to like actually break down all the letters,
Yeah.
but it's the same feeling I feel like my dad had, was like she was just like the apple of his eye. Like everything, he was
Yeah.
amazed with everything that she did. Everything she did was amazing and perfect. And he even said, like, I think it was in the last letter where he was like, you're 28, but I feel like it's the same thing where I'm like counting all your toes and just like amazed with everything. And I that definitely feel like was like my dad. Like everything I did was magical, amazing.
Yeah.
And I felt that in those letters.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's in the letters we realize, like, people are imperfect, relationships between people are gonna be imperfect, but the one thing he tried to do more than anything was be a good dad to her, and I think, like, that goes to show, like, in some sense, like, everything he did was kinda because, like, she was his truest love, like, his love for her was so,
Yeah.
like, unconditional, and kinda like, I don't know, this thing of forgiving people for their flaws, but, he still had this, like, grand love for her, and I'm like, "Oh,
I know, so sweet.
I love when dads love their kids."
Um, so chapter 26 opens where hours have passed. She hasn't heard from Gus, of course, his MO.
Right.
And and when her best friend does actually show up for her, she just texted her like she needs her, and she's like, I'll take the next train." And so she does redeem herself from her shitty 4th of July
Yep.
behavior. She called her mom, told her everything that's going on, cried to her, really opened up, mended their relationship. And then Shadi arrived. Shadi like cooked for her. And then January turned off her phone. And that ends chapter 26. So chapter 27, we're going to our last two chapters. One thing that she mentions about Shadi, which I feel like you kind of get a little bit more glimpse. It doesn't really focus on their friendship too much throughout the book, so it's kind of hard to get a read on Shadi as like a person.
Yeah.
But the way that she describes her in this next chapter is, she said, when she's connected with someone, she opens up like a rose to expose the most tender, pure, selfless, and loyal heart I'd ever known. I feel like it's something where it's like it's harder to get to know people truly, and I feel like that's like a reflection of their actually like beautiful friendship.
Yeah.
And thankfully Shadi did show up when she actually needed her. And then they're just kind of having girl time in this chapter. And then she wakes up to Gus banging on the door.
Yeah, like pounding.
Very dramatic fashion. And they're like, what's going on? Deciding what to do. And then she hears him say, like, January, I need to talk to you. Please just talk to me. And she finally gets up, kind of gives it a few minutes, and then he's gone. Very dramatic. And then she's like freaking out, like, oh my God, I missed my chance,
It's
blah,
pouring
blah.
rain, by the way, like, there's
Yeah.
a thunderstorm,
Super dramatic, romantic way, this
torrential
things happen.
downpour.
Yeah. And then she sees Gus come back out, but he has like a boombox, and he's like, oh, I thought we could dance in the rain, I'll dance with you, which is like, so cheesy, romantic. But then he's like trying to explain what happened, that Naomi wants to get back together, she wants to give him another shot, and he's like rambling, like, I could see that, like, we could get back together. And January's like, what in the
Yeah.
hell?
Because
And
remember,
then
his communication skills are 0.
yeah, and it's like, okay, guess you need to really fix how you explain stuff,
Yeah, you shouldn't have
because
led with that.
yeah. And then he's just like, no, I he realized like I wouldn't want to be married to Naomi again. He's like, no, but I was wrong because I realized like I would want that with you. I just wouldn't ever want that with Naomi to like be married and happy. And he said that January is so perfectly his favorite person, which is cute.
Oh.
Doesn't erase all the other shit he did, but he did. It's cute. And he does bring up the line like, when I watch you sleep, I feel overwhelmed you exist, which is something that they talked about. Like, she didn't feel that with Jax, and he said that he feels that now. But the conversation in this chapter is just like freaking out, kind of like, what does this mean? We're both in a weird place. He's like, I'm broken and blah blah blah. And then they kind of decide maybe like, let's enjoy being happy for now, which I think sometimes you don't focus so much on like the happiness of now. We think about like the future so much,
Yeah.
what it should look like, and it's like you can't change the future so much sometimes, you know, like look at my life. And I think sometimes because of that you forget to enjoy the now
Yeah.
and like the happy. So I appreciated that line as a serial griever. So the last chapter.
Is this the one that was like 9 months later?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Talk about. I was like, oh my god, they're already pregnant.
Yeah, I know. There's a few things that pissed me off. Not pissed me off, but just was like, I don't really understand. Because, like, so they both sold their books. But then what I didn't get was she sold her dad's house. And which I didn't think she needed to do because she sold her book and she was like going back to her writing career. So I don't feel like it. And she just got an apartment like in town. I didn't get why she gave up her house.
Yeah, in this
That
economy,
didn't make sense. Yeah. But
with
that
these
didn't make
millennials
sense to
on the
me.
street,
Also, it's like if you didn't need to,
could
why would
invest in the
you?
property. Yeah, why wouldn't you Airbnb
You
it?
Yeah, you could rent it out, but also because it's a thing that your dad left you that's gone, and he wanted you to have it, and it's different than just like a regular piece of property. I feel like he wanted it for her,
And why would
which I
she
didn't
go
get.
sell her?
It just didn't make sense to me. Like if she was still gonna live in the area and not live with Gus, it doesn't make sense, and she still
I
could have just.
I had the same thoughts. I was like, why does this
This
not make
part,
sense?
I don't agree with Emily Henry out of everything.
Emily Henry, we have some thoughts.
Yeah. So I didn't really get that, but besides that,
I did like the kind of the changing of the seasons, and she kind of does this like look back of, you know, going to the lake in wintertime, and I thought that was like really beautiful. Like,
yeah,
because she talks a lot about the lake in the summer, and like Gus is like, I don't like it in the summer, but she goes really descriptive into the beauty of the lake in the wintertime, like the lighthouse description and them all bundled up in like multiple parkas. And as someone who lives in Texas and that doesn't
you dream
happen,
of this.
I was like, wow, how idyllic. Like what a little winter wonderland. I just thought that was so sweet. Like such a like a beautiful view of nature um in a different time of year because we've been, what is this, summer that most of the book is in?
Yeah, and this is where the line where I'm like, is this the reason for the book? Because basically, it was his coming up to his birthday, the anniversary of the re-meeting, and Gus is like, I want to. I don't want to. He told his friend, I don't want to have that big party. He's like, I just want to go read on the beach for hours. So I was like, is this the reasoning for it being called the beach read? It's because he reached a spot where like he was healed. He didn't need to pretend he was okay. He was just happy and content to be reading on the beach
Yeah.
with January, and that was like his healed place, which this is just how I'm interpreting it. I don't know if this is actually the reason, but this is the first time where I feel like I've actually was beach read was even mentioned
Mm-hmm.
was in this occasion, and I feel like it's when Gus is like at peace.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, and I think on top, like, Emily Henry has notoriety in, like, books talking about books. Like, she has that other book, Book Lovers, and, I
Oh
think she
yeah.
sometimes I think sometimes she might just be a little meta.
Yeah, we don't know. We need to know Emily Henry. But one thing that they mentioned in the books is like the Gus didn't really perfectly write like a romance book, and she didn't really write like a sad book in there. I think her story ended with like both of the main characters dying together, so that was like the sad ending. And she said she's angry these characters deserve better than what they've gotten and somehow comforted by their experience. And she said, yes, that is how life feels too often. Life, you're doing everything you can to survive, to be sabotaged by something beyond your control, maybe even some darker part of yourself. And I feel like we've talked about it so many times. Grief happens to you, loss happens to you. It's not something that you control. And even the line, like, maybe even a darker part of yourself you sabotage, which I feel like it can happen so easily with grief, is like you're so sad that you don't embrace life, you don't take time for yourself, you don't try to live your life. And I thought that line was so true, because sometimes it's like the outside factors, but sometimes it's just us not being able to adapt. And that's a hard thing. It's not easy to get to a place where you feel like, oh, my life is worth living.
Yeah.
And
it is that weird thing of when you do lose somebody and you are in the darkest part of your life trying to figure out how to cope with this. And if this is the first time that's ever happened, then it is weird to meet a new version of yourself. And you're like, I didn't know this like darker, sadder person existed in me. And, I think of it also in times of survival, we don't know really what we'll do until it happens. We can think about what we would do, but in actuality, we don't really know. And I think that's the same thing. Is like you're in the survival mode in grief, and you meet this new version of yourself, and you're like, I don't know if I like the griefy person in me.
Anything else in this chapter?
Sure,
Go
yeah.
ahead, Kendall. Let
I'll hit
everyone.
the highlights. So they're reading their little books. They're at the lake. They're reading each other's books. They're kind of just watching, like, I think the sunset, and they're just having like a cute little moment. And then they're walking back up, and they're talking about his birthday and stuff. And they walk into his house, and it's a surprise party. And she like is seeing everybody that we've met in the book. His aunt. What's his aunt's name?
Pete.
Patty? Pete, and, her wife is there, her mom is there, and it's just, like, a sweet little moment, and she's like, "Oh, a surprise party for him," and she's like, "He didn't want a party," like, kinda awkward,
Yeah.
and then she turns around, and he is proposing to her. Oh my god,
Yeah.
I'm crying.
And he wrote it on a note, which is like their thing. And he said, "Marry me." And that was
Ugh,
cute.
stop. She says yes, in case those were wondering at home.
Yeah. So it's like Gus has become this like cute, full person that knows how to love her,
Mhm.
which is nice. One thing I read is like in the United States, it's very common for romance books to always end in marriage. There's always a proposal. Like that's the happy ending. I think I read that the beach read in other countries might not end with a proposal. Or like there's other
Mhm.
versions, because that isn't the happy, to other people that is not always the happy ending. So it's like it's interesting. I don't know. Which is true. Like you don't need to always end in marriage for it to be a happy ending.
Yeah.
And there's so many books where like, would they actually work out?
Yeah, and it leaves room for mystery.
Yes, leaves room for a part two. It basically, I feel like the last kind of line that January just reflecting, it was just another day, a perfect day, happy for now, so vast and deep, I knew, or rather believed, I didn't have to worry about tomorrow. And I think that's like a beautiful place to be, of just like really enjoying your life as you can, and like
Yeah.
having those really good happy moments. Like you really have to embrace those happy moments, because you don't know what tomorrow brings. You don't know tomorrow if you might wake up in a bad mood or a sad mood. It's hard. You have to really focus on the now in so many ways, just to like really experience that and not worry about, because I think grief makes you worry about a lot of things.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's like she's just worrying about like, this is a day I don't have to worry about tomorrow, and
Yeah.
really embracing it. So I thought that was a nice ending for me, more so than even just engagement. It's like this was like a cute thing for me
Yeah.
personally.
There's still this acknowledgement of, like, her grief and, like, Gus because, like, he also lost his mom, but that they're living day by day, and they're happy with that. That works for them, and they're happy working on their day by day. I think that really sums up the kind of the presence, because she even talks about he comes home and it's a bad day and he's like, well, it was another good day. Like he says it
Yeah.
sarcastically. But still, like at the core of it, he's like, I'm happy in this moment with you.
Yeah. And so that is the end of this book.
Yay, book 2 done.
And so our next book club episode is actually going to be a 1-episode overview of a book. And the book is actually Jessica Fine's
Breathtaking.
So the next, we're going to do a 1-part book club overview of this book. Me and Kendall are both almost finished with it. It's by Jessica Fine. We're also going to do a Substack interview release with her, and probably also I think we're going to have her on the podcast actually and ask her for our book club portion, ask her about the book and kind of learn more about it. And it's really a beautiful story, a sad at point story, but also just like a very real story.
Beautifully
About
written.
grief and family and love, and yeah, it's just very easy to read and relate to. I definitely related so much to it, so we're excited to do a 1-episode series. But one thing we haven't done yet is, what would you rate on the griefy meter, the Emily Henry book?
I would give it, I think like a 3 or a 4, a 3.5.
I was gonna give it like a 3 or a 2.5.
Did it meet the tirometer, the griefometer?
I feel like because we came out so hot with H Mart, I literally bawled so many times with H Mart. Like, I would give that as a 5 out of 5.
That was 5 out of 5.
On the griefy meter for me. That was hard. There were so many just very vivid imagery moments in that book, and so many relatable moments in that book for me, that I cried so much reading that book. So
yeah,
that was a 5 out of 5
heavy
for me.
hitter.
For this book, there's like some cute parts and stuff, which I liked.
It's very easy to read. I think
lighter, happier tone.
Yeah, if you're if you're like me and you're psychotic and you like to lean into your pain, crying at H Mart is really great, and like relating to somebody else with that like profound, great book, wonderful writing. But Beach Read it's like fun. You're in the throes of like, you know, the enemies to lovers, are they, aren't they kind of thing. So it's a lot less griefy. You're toned down. So if you're not looking for something like super hard hitting, I think Beach Read is great because it has like a subplot of grief, but it's not in your face.
That's why I say it's like a 3 for me, because there was lines in there and just moments that really were, I felt it, you know, just like very relatable, very real, but I wasn't transported to the exact time in my life where I related to things. And that could be also maybe the space that I'm in, but there was also just so much other like cutesy moments, like giddy moments, that it kind of like padded the grief.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just like hard hitting wham, wham, wham with like something like a memoir and a real book like H Mart. So yeah, for me, it's like a 3. It's like a safe grief book.
I agree.
For me, it's like a safe.
It's a comfort book.
Yeah, comfort book. Happiness. So we're going to come back with that Jessica Fine episode. And then tomorrow, we're releasing our 12th episode and the final episode of season 1. We are going to do season 2 and beyond, but it officially ends. But we are going to be doing Christmas content or holiday content for the remainder of the time until we restart our season in January. So we are going to be continuing 2 episodes. They're just not going to be as formal as our regular episodes, and they're going to be focused more on holiday related grief and things like that. So stay tuned for that.
So if you have liked this book club so far, we invite you to join our book club on Fable. So if you're using Fable to like track your reading or to join other book clubs, we're going to be covering the books that we read here on the podcast on Fable, so we can be more interactive and have more discussions, I think, on a deeper basis. And just, I think it's just like a fun platform. But you can find us, I think, at Two Girls with Grief Book Club on there, or Yeah, well, yeah. And yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. We're really excited.
It's fun. I like it a lot better than Goodreads.
Ugh,
Just like,
I
and
agree.
you can do 0.5 stars, which I feel like is a huge
Mhm. And
thing.
it's just, like, a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. I feel
Yeah.
like it's a little bit more engaging.
I feel like by now Goodreads should have had some more updates. No
Yeah,
offense.
I feel like it's like in Web.1, it's like you need to know how to code to use Goodreads.
Yeah. That's exciting. So follow us on Fable, and then also follow us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube at Two Girls with Grief Pod. You can also email us if you have grief book recommendations, questions, anything. Email us at twogirlswithgrief@gmail.com. So thank you for coming along for another book. We really enjoyed this one. It was a nice happy medium with grief. No tears were shed on my account. So it was a happy one. And stay tuned for our final episode tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.